welcome Ruth Wageman. Ruth is joining us now from Arizona, live from Arizona, where I think it's like 5:30 a.m. Ruth, is that right?
Yes, it is. Pitch black outside, as you can see. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be with you.
You're very, very welcome. So Ruth is one of the world's leading scholars on studying and working with teams, especially leadership teams. And she says that the most important problems and aspirations of our time can only be addressed by brilliant collaborations in teams. Ruth's core research has been focused on the conditions that influence superb team performance. And that's resulted in the 6 teams conditions model that we've been engaging with today. She's a professor at Columbia, or has been a professor at Columbia, Dartmouth, and Harvard, and she's widely published in the academic and business press. She's written several books, including Senior Team Leadership Teams, What It Takes to Make Them Great. I believe when she's not cooking or enjoying science fiction or riding her horse out in Arizona, Ruth leads the team behind the 6 conditions and team diagnostic survey. So this morning, I think, Ruth, you're going to fill us in on your view on combining the science of team effectiveness with the art of team coaching.
That's exactly. So thank you for the welcome. Really glad to be here with you. Thanks for letting me hear a little bit of what's come out of your conversation using the 6 conditions framework today. I just want to take a few minutes to talk about the origins of our research and framework and how we arrived at this idea of conditions thinking as an approach to building and leading great teams. And you'll note that our tagline here is the science and the art of great teams. I want to share with you some of the background of the science, and then I'll say a few words about the implications of this science of conditions thinking for actually how we bring the art of team coaching to really developing great teams. So I'm going to just start by sharing with you one of my favorite quotations from my colleague, Richard Hackman, who is my co-author in this work. He's widely cited as saying that I have no question that when you have a team, the possibility exists that it will generate magic, producing something extraordinary, but don't count on it. And he's often been characterized, I think, as being rather pessimistic about teams, because he also wrote a widely cited article called Why Teams Don't Work. But I think really an alternative title would be When Teams Don't Work. And what he was trying to say is that it takes great intentionality to get a team onto a trajectory towards greatness. You can't really just bring a very talented set of individuals together. That does not actually guarantee you the recipe for creating a great team. And in the course of our research on teams, we studied many different kinds of teams. We've always been especially interested in teams whose performance really matters in real time, like airline cockpit crews or surgical teams or crisis management teams or musical ensembles who really have to perform for their stakeholders under real pressure in real time. And what we've noticed about the common writing about teams and how to have great teams is this tendency to give everything that the leader does in the real-time performance of the team most of the credit or most of the blame, depending on how well the team does. So when our favorite football team wins, we praise the coach and how the coach directed the action in real time. And when the team has a losing season, we fire the coach. And it's such a common way of thinking about what the main drivers of team effectiveness are that we coined this term, the leader attribution error. It's really over attributing the success or failure of a team to what the leader who is present with the team does, like the real-time coordination, directing, motivation, like what a conductor of an orchestra does, the actions of the leader in real time that shape the dynamics of the team. And I often like to invite people to just sort of test your instinct when you look at these different ways of acting on a team. What does your instincts tell you is the most powerful point of leverage if you want to make a difference to take a team from mediocre to great or from good to great? Is all the action, is the leverage in how you build the relationship between the leader and the members? Is it in developing the psychological safety, the trust, the willingness to take risks among the members? Is it by taking out of the game any of the negative relationships, like the existing conflicts that are interfering in the team's work? Or is it something more like establishing a compelling purpose and then keeping them together long enough so that they can accomplish something meaningful together? Now, all of these, I think, are very plausible ways of thinking about how you can get the leverage to act on a team and to promote their effectiveness. They're all plausible. They're actually all out there in the research literature on teams. But I want to suggest that this fourth option is actually a distinctive approach. It's a distinctive way of thinking about how to build great teams. And here's why. Here's the puzzle that Richard and I were addressing in the research literature on teams. Many of the common models of team effectiveness propose that there's a relationship, a really strong relationship between the dynamics in the team, the processes that we see that team members use, and the outcomes. Slightly more sophisticated models will notice that there's a relationship between inputs, like the kind of task that we ask the team to do, or the level of talent of the people on the team, or their histories with each other, that also relate to those processes and that drive those outcomes. And we actually see lots and lots of evidence in the research literature that there are relationships between processes and outcomes. So there's lots of evidence that trust is positively related to team performance, or that high levels of conflict are negatively related to team performance. So it's processes are predictive of performance, and so are inputs. So we can see that the kind of tasks that we ask people to do influence the kinds of processes that emerge in the team. The composition of the team influences the kinds of dynamics that arise. But here's the kicker. What we have seen in the research literature is that trying to go directly after those processes through hands-on coaching of the team dynamic does not actually result in improved performance in the team. In fact, my favorite article title of all time is this. The title says, "The conspicuous absence of evidence that process consultation improves team task performance." And in essence, what they did was do a literature review of all of the studies of interventions in teams that really focused on improving the team processes. And they found that in a vast majority of cases, there were no effects on team performance. In a handful of cases, there were actually negative effects on team performance, primarily because team members can become very engaged in this work around improving their relationships and improving their process dynamics, and it tends to distract from actually getting the real work done, which I think is consistent with one of the observations that you had made in coming in out of your breakout groups. And so we decided to tackle this question in a different way, which is really addressing the input side of the equation, and to treat teams as complex social systems, which indeed they are, and to bring the idea of conditions thinking to understanding teams. And what we have been asking in our work is, can we identify what the handful of designable conditions, features of a team that you can intentionally put in place that collectively, not individually, collectively, most powerfully influence both the dynamics that we see in the team and the ultimate outcomes that we see in the team? So what are the handful of things that we can intentionally influence that increase the chances that a team will chart its own course in a very positive direction? So can we stack the deck in favor of this complex social system really charting their own course to greatness? So it's a very different logic of intervention in terms of how you can actually create a great team. It does contain the fundamentals of inputs, processes, and outcomes, right? But where we differ from the rest of these models is understanding that both processes and the ultimate outcomes, team performance, getting better and better over time, the satisfaction of individual members, are both driven by these conditions that we create. And therefore, our greatest point of leverage is to act directly on those conditions. That's the underpinnings of the 6 conditions framework that you have been exploring today. And ultimately, what we learned is that there are 6 fundamental building blocks, 6 conditions that collectively stack the deck in favor of a team performing well over time. And there's a rough sequencing to those 6 conditions, meaning that these 3 essentials that you have been exploring with your teams this morning, they're the fundamental building blocks, and they have to be basically in good shape if you want to have a great team at all. So the real team with a compelling purpose and the right people, that's the core of what must be in place, that sturdy platform that we have to build. And then there are 3 additional conditions that we've come to call the enablers that accelerate the development of that fundamentally well-designed team into a truly superb performing unit. And so this actually leads us to a pretty different way of thinking about how we can go about, as team leaders, as the sponsors of teams, as team development professionals, how do we use our energy to actually make a difference in the effectiveness of teams? And so Richard and I have proposed this 60-30-10 rule. It's a heuristic, it's a rough rule of how you can go about really making a difference to the effectiveness of your teams. And roughly it goes like this. 60% of the really critical acts of leadership that really make a difference to team effectiveness happen before the team even exists. It's in the intelligent preparations and the design work that you do to think through the question, does this work need a team? Does it really make sense to bring a group of people together to do this work? And how can I articulate the fundamental purpose to the team in a way that connects with their values, that offers them real clarity about what success would look like, that raises the level of challenge in a way that will engage them, and then who can actually contribute to the fulfillment of that purpose? Who's got the capabilities and the diversity of perspectives to really perform that, and what resources are they going to need to pull it off? So that's the 60%. It's the design work that you do as a leader. So thinking of yourself not just as the hands-on coach of a team, but primarily as a designer and a person who can shape the initial design of the team. 30% of the really critical acts of leadership occur the first time the team convenes. It's breathing life into that excellent design work and those great preparations that you have done, helping the team to understand what resources they have to draw on, both in each other and in the context that you have created, helping them come to terms with what the purpose is and put their own spin on it and connect it to their values, just to begin to develop those norms of conduct that are going to support their effectiveness. That's the 30%. So now we've got 90% of the really critical acts of leadership kind of done in the first hour of the life of a group. And then the last 10% is the real-time hands-on coaching, the way that you support the team in making the best possible use of the very favorable performance circumstances that you have set for the group. And I always like to ask groups of leaders, where do you think you are spending the bulk or the greatest percentage of your time in leading your team? And by and large, there tends to be an inclination towards spending a lot of time on that 10%. And one of the observations I'd like to share is that if you find yourself intervening a lot in the practices of your team, it may very well be because the 60% and the 30% needed more attention than they were given. And that what you are doing is trying to coach an inadequately designed team to greatness. And what we found in our research is that you really cannot coach a badly designed team to greatness. Coaching is at its most effective. The interventions that you do in the day-to-day processes and dynamics of a team are most effective when they're already standing on a very sturdy platform and the design and the launch have already been done really well. And so finally, I just want to say that we make this distinction in the way that we think about coaching teams and the kinds of coaching that you can do with your teams that really helps. And that is by working with the team members, working with the sponsors or other people who support the team to really get those positive conditions in place and keep them in place over the life of the team. We think about that as structural coaching. It's engaging with the team and those that influence the team around those 6 conditions and shaping those conditions to be in the best possible shape, as opposed to process coaching, which is primarily focused on the dynamics of the team. And so that may mean as the context shifts or as the purpose of the team shifts, we may need to revisit the composition, the norms, the resources, the other design conditions that are involved in the team. And where we need to put our energy in making a difference to the effectiveness of teams is really into the design and launch, or indeed the relaunch of teams in order to generate the brilliant collaboration that we need of people. So that's where I will stop my remarks for the moment. I'll just draw your attention to some additional easily available resources if you're curious to learn more. On the 16 Conditions website, we have a podcast about the 6 Conditions framework. I think the first 11 episodes really they're about a half hour a piece, and they take you through each of the conditions in detail and some of the work that we have done with teams around those. We have a blog and a series of books and articles that really unpack the science behind the framework. But I will just pause there and see what thoughts and questions I've sparked by sharing with you some of the thinking behind the research. Thanks.
That's great, Ruth. Thank you very much for that. So I'm going to open the floor to some questions that people may have. Happy that you jump in by just unmuting if you like, or you can share any questions in the chat for Ruth. I might just start that off actually with taking up the running on one question that came out of the breakout rooms, which Mary posed, which was, how do you measure team effectiveness?
Yeah, so in our work, I mean, I'll propose to you how we do it. In our work, we have 3 criteria of team effectiveness. We ask, so every team has a client. They could be clients inside the organization that use the work of the team. They could be external clients. Leadership teams have multiple stakeholders that they serve. But ultimately to us, the really critical measure of team effectiveness is, are they meeting the needs of their stakeholders? So given what their purpose is and whom they exist to serve, what is it that their stakeholders need of them? They're the ones that get to comment on whether they are adequately served by the work of the team. That's our first criterion. It's the task performance as seen through the eyes of those that the team serves. The second thing that we look at is the team actually getting better and better as a performing unit over time? Organizations really cannot afford to have teams that perform brilliantly once and burn themselves out in the process, right? It has to be that they are operating in ways where they are getting smarter, sharper, more capable of dealing with the challenges they face and dealing with greater and greater challenges as a consequence of the way that they work together. And then the final criterion we look at is that the team needs to have a positive impact on its members. Now, all teams create some frustration among their members, but on balance, a team is effective to the extent that it is a context in which the individuals learn, grow, and develop because of the colleagues that they are working with as part of their teams. And we measure all of those throughout our research, and the findings of this research are based on looking at teams that actually manage to do all 3 of those things.
Great, thanks, Ruth. Happy to invite any other questions if anybody wants to jump in. Ruth, do you want to unshare? Thank you very much.
Great.
Hi, Dennis Hurley here from Ripplecom. I have a question about smaller organizations where maybe the talent pool isn't as large as larger organizations, and you have teams made up of maybe higher achieving individuals and maybe less capable people in the team also. But in terms of coaching that sort of a team, or where it might not be the ideal pick of team members if you had, an open field to choose from, but you still have to get and achieve something with a team with some individuals who maybe have limited capability. Yeah,
that's right. It's a great question. And, I often get questions about the right people and it's usually about, so what do I do with the fact that I'm stuck with this team? And it's a significant challenge to remove members. And my answer is always, don't go to DEFCON 5. The right people doesn't mean you need to necessarily reconfigure, get rid of some people, invite other people in. One of the implications, though, is to ask the question, what are the core capacities that you have to have represented in the team in order to accomplish that purpose? And which ones are already well present somewhere in the composition of the team, and which ones are not yet adequately represented in order to accomplish that purpose well. that gives you a development agenda for your team, right? Your team members, even if they're relatively inexperienced and they don't have a high level of skill yet, can actually acquire a high level of skills in a variety of different ways. And so there's individual coaching, there's development, there's schooling. There are other ways of actually raising the game of team members, but really focused on the particular things that you need in order to accomplish that collective purpose. So that's the primary way that I would look at that. I would also want to look at, in small organizations, as you say, particularly in young organizations that have not yet developed, they have not fully developed all of their structures and systems. Very often the organizational context does not yet provide the kinds of training, technical consultation, educational opportunities that contribute to team effectiveness. But you can actually cobble those things together if they're front of mind and you're really thinking about the design of your team. You can be thinking about how do you create those kinds of learning opportunities that will enable a young team to really do well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Dennis. I can just add to that and say that team coaching obviously happens at the level of the team, but actually very often we're combining individual development and individual coaching with the activity that we're doing at the team. And that way we're together and maybe picking up on some of the weaknesses and development areas, so as then the benefit flows through to how the team operates. Yeah.
Hi, Ruth. Can I ask a question, please? My name is David O'Connor. In relation to if we had, say, a high-performing team, if I could identify a team that I knew was high-performing, and then we had another team that may not be as high-performing, would you recommend mixing up the talent pool, taking some people from the high-performing team and putting them in the underperforming team to make a better balance?
No, actually, that's actually been directly studied. And very often what happens is that your high-performing team is high-performing as a consequence of that configuration and what they have learned about how to work together. And what you'll wind up doing is winding up with very likely with two poor-performing teams. What you can do is keep your high-performing team intact, and work with them to understand what is the special sauce of what they know how to do and what they have learned, and how can they share that with the team that is actually struggling. The other thing I would do, David, is to take a careful look at the design of your poor performing team. There may be something in the fundamental design that is not yet in good enough shape, and so they haven't been set up for you to get the best out of those individuals. It may not just be a consequence of the talent of the individuals, but rather of those other conditions as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Ruth, just in terms of, for me, trying to understand what you mean by the design of the team, are you talking about the skills of the people involved, the roles of the people involved, that they're aligned to the work that the team are supposed to be doing, or what encompasses the design of the team? I'm talking about those 6 conditions. So I think the first question that many people don't ask adequately is, do I really need a team to do this work at all? Or, why do I need a team, and to what degree is a team called for here? And doing that thinking through about what is the work here that requires multiple perspectives, that requires multiple people's efforts and skills and capabilities, acting interdependently in order to accomplish it well. Okay, I've answered those questions for myself. How do I share the purpose of this team in a way that really connects that with the overall purpose of the organization? Who can I invite into that work? Who can genuinely contribute to that purpose? What kinds of resources are they going to need? And one of the things that this idea of design often implicates is you as a team leader may not have control over all the things that a team needs in order to be effective. So, for example, some of the obvious ones is that supportive organizational context. If you're the sponsor of a team who's about to launch a team, you may not have direct control over how rewards are distributed in the organization or the availability of training and technical consultation. You may need to exercise influence with other actors in the organization in order to get that supportive context in place. That's what I mean by being a team designer. It's thinking through what's the work that is interdependent, who are the people that can contribute to that, what are the resources they're going to need to do that, and how do I need to exercise influence in that context to bring all of those conditions together to get this group to the best possible start. That's what I mean by design thinking. Does that help, Anthony?
Yeah, that's really good, Ruth. Thank you very much.
Sure.
That's great, Ruth. Thank you very much for that. I'm conscious of time, and we said we'd finish at 1 o'clock, so we're coming right up against that. So, excuse me, I'm going to wind up now, but we will stay on the line for anyone who still has a question or two. Happy to do that after 1 o'clock. And for anyone who has to go, you can drop your questions in the chat. I'm happy to follow up with you if you have any particular queries that you want to talk to us about or to ask of Ruth. To wind up, I want to thank Suzanne and Dee for putting together this morning in the Institute of Engineers. The support that they gave in pulling this together was fantastic, and they got all of you on the call, which was great to see happening. So thank you very much to you guys. Also to Gary and to Siemens and the Siemens team in pulling together and supporting us and sponsoring this as an event. So really appreciate you also then for turning up and showing an interest and great enthusiasm, great conversations in those breakout rooms. So we really, really do appreciate that. So I'm happy to wind up and say thank you again, and hopefully we'll see you on the far side of this call with some queries and questions. So thank you again.